So a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Chris Ball, Policy Manager at NELC. It's my pleasure today to be chairing today's online event, The Housing Puzzle, putting local councils at the heart of the solution. First, I'd like you to quickly run through the housekeeping announcements, some of which are shown on the slide on the screen. Do please use the Q&A function throughout the event to put questions to our speakers and the chat function to interact with your fellow delegates and to share any information or links. If you require any technical support, please do post them into the chat. Any queries, and my NELC colleague will do her best to help. The closed caption feature, subtitles can be accessed by all attendees at any time during today's event. For desktop and laptop users, to turn on closed captions, please select Show Captions. The button will be labelled CC. If the button is not visible, please select the three dots on the bottom right corner of the screen. Then please select Captions, and after that you'll be prompted to click Show Captions, so please select this option. If you're using a mobile device or tablet, please scroll across the menu on the bottom of your screen and select Captions. You'll then need to click Show Captions, and once they're on, you can access a live transcription of today's event. If you've selected the closed caption feature, please use the reactions feature, the button on the right-hand side of the closed caption feature, by ticking the yes button, the green emoji with a tick, to show us that the closed captions are working at your end. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, again, please contact NELC support via the chat and we'll try and rectify the issue for you. After today's event, we'll send any presentation slides used today. I think all three speakers have got fantastic slide decks that they're going to be speaking to. I've had a look through them, absolutely brilliant. The chat and any other useful information. And we'll also be inviting your feedback on today's event, so please do look out for the feedback form, which should pop up on your screens following the conclusion of the webinar. That's at the very end. All delegates will be muted on entry, as you've probably seen, to the Zoom webinar platform. That is a function of the platform we use. Just a slide on sponsors, please, Liv, thanks. NELC would like to thank its current partners, Clear and CCLA, for their extensive support for today's NELC online event. And moving on to the main theme of today. Like its predecessor, the new government faces the ongoing challenge of addressing the housing shortage and fixing the broken housing market, something which successive governments really have struggled to solve. A key objective is introducing greater flexibility, enabling communities to have a meaningful say in housing allocations and locations. But where do parish and town councils fit into this critical conversation? This event will explore the role of housing associations working to tackle these challenges and include insights from a stakeholder involved in rolling out successful community-led housing initiatives. By the end of today's event, you'll have gained practical knowledge to collaborate with associations and the like, and the necessary steps to implement community-led housing projects in your area successfully. This will empower you and your councils to make a real difference, we believe, in your community. So I'm thrilled to be able to introduce today our brilliant panel of speakers. Martin Collett, Chief Executive at the English Rural Housing Association, Tom Chance, Chief Executive of the National Community Land Trust Network, and Sheila Hawkins, Secretary of Broad Windsor Group Parish Community Land Trust. Now, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Martin to speak to his fantastic slide deck. Over to you, Martin.
Great. Thanks very much for the introduction, Chris. Am I sharing my slides, or is somebody kindly sharing them with me? For me.
Liv will do that for you.
Brilliant. Excellent. That's going to save me having to try and figure out how to do that. So I'm Martin Collett. I'm Chief Executive of English Rural Housing Association. I also wear a few other hats as well. So I co-chair the Rural Housing Network, which brings together housing associations and those from across the rural and the housing sort of sectors together with government agencies. And I also chair a National Rural Homelessness Advisory Group, which is facilitated by Homeless Link. And I've been working in affordable rural housing for over 2 decades now. However, I don't claim to be an expert, but I know a lot about a little about a lot of things. If we can go to the next slide, if that's okay. In terms of who English Rural Housing Association are, we're a specialist provider of affordable rural housing. And what I mean by that is we only build small developments in small rural villages, and that's principally across the south and southeast of England now. And we've got around sort of 1,600 properties in almost 200 villages, spanning around sort of 40 local authority areas. So we're quite dispersed. That's intentional, and it sort of demonstrates, the need across the areas where we're working to deliver these houses. We work with parish councils, and I'll pick up on a little bit more on that in a moment to talk about the partnership we have with parish councils. But importantly, we work with some local authorities and landowners as well. And we're part of a convener, if you like, of a partnership that helps affordable rural housing projects to come to fruition. Most of our houses, so around sort of 90% of our developments, have been built on what's called the rural exceptions sites. And again, I'll sort of just touch on what I mean by that in a moment. But that means that there are restrictions around how those houses are allocated, which mean that local people have preference when we are looking for residents to move into them, both at the point they're first let, but also subsequently as well. And that's quite important for us, because when we are going in and working with those community partners and indeed landowners as well, one of the things we want to try and do is to think about the housing needs affecting those communities and what we can do to genuinely try and deliver houses that help to meet those needs as well. If we can go through the next slide, I mean, I'm sure you're also tuning in because you're aware of the crisis facing is in terms of housing. I'm wondering, Liv, if we need to click these, and they might appear, there's some bullet points to appear if you just keep going till you get to the end of this. So one more, that's it, stop there. So, in terms of the housing crisis facing rural communities, we know there's a shortage of affordable rural homes, and that's partly because we've not been investing enough in building them. It's partly because they have been sort of sold off through the right to buy, and it's partly because strategically at government, central government and local government level, they haven't sort of invested enough in trying to tackle this crisis. So we've got around sort of 19% of urban stock is classed as affordable, only 9% of rural. So there's a real mismatch there. So there aren't enough rural homes. And then we've got other pressures facing rural communities as well. So we've got, a high proportion of holiday homes or holiday lets, certainly in particular sort of geographies, that is a challenge, which drives up prices and also takes stock away from those that are living and working locally as well. We've also got a mismatch between local earnings and market property costs as well, which, looking at the most extreme, sort of 16 to 1 in rural areas and 8 versus 8 to 1 in urban. So actually, if you think about what local people are earning in rural communities as to what the houses are actually costing, it's more challenging for those living in rural communities as well. And because of that, we've got huge waiting lists. As of 2023, to over 200,000 individuals on rural housing waiting lists. And I think there was some research by CPRE that said at current sort of build rates and availability rates, that would take around 90 years to actually resolve that. So some huge challenges there as well. And because of that, we've got villages that are becoming older. We've got services that are closing down, pubs, shops, schools, and businesses that aren't able to reach their potential because they can't get people to work. And you've got, those entrepreneurs that are setting up businesses moving to urban areas. So it's a crisis that is continuing to get worse as well. And one of the things that we say is if you built, just 6 houses, a small development, corner of a field, half an acre, just 6 houses in every village up and down England, actually we get 53,000 rural homes, which is actually, a fairly significant number in terms terms of overall delivery, a big impact in that community, but we're not taking a huge amount of space in order to do that as well. So we do try and encourage every parish to think about what their housing needs are and how they might be able to solve them as well. If we go on to the next slide, if that's okay, I'm not going to go through this in huge detail because I'm sort of fairly limited for time. But you'll see on this, if you look at the start and then the sort of start on the site, you can sort of follow the birds and the footprints down. There's a lot that happens in terms of actually getting houses starting on site. And I think, it's important to recognize that the process, can be lengthy, can be complex, but that shouldn't prove as a barrier to those who want to try and get something done. And I'm sort of talking about sort of partnering with a housing association like English Rural. There are others out there that are operating as well. And one of the things that I would say is organizations like English Rural and our peers, we have done this before. Many times over. And we have the skills, the expertise, and importantly, the resources, financial and intelligence to make sure that we know how to make things happen as smoothly as they can, to overcome any challenges that arise, and to support the community group that we're working with to actually make sure that their objective of getting some affordable homes built actually happens as well. Ordinarily, we would come in as a housing association when the community, either via the parish council or a local sort of CLT, had recognised that there was a need to deliver some affordable homes and had sought to understand what that need might be. Typically, we work also with rural housing enablers, who are county-based individuals who will work with parishes to help understand what that need is by carrying out sort of surveys. So actually, we come in at the point the community have an idea, have an objective, and have an idea of need. And we will come in at that point and wrap our expertise around that group to make sure that things progress. And that is partly around sort of looking for potential sites. So we understand what sites might be viable, might not be viable, what planners may think about sites as well. So we sort of start to look at sort of sites, and also we've got sort of skills in terms of negotiating with landowners as well. What might incentivize that landowner to make that sort of corner of the field available, and how do we negotiate with that landowner as well? But also early doors, we'll be looking at the site and thinking, actually, are there going to be some significant viability issues around delivering this site? For example, is it too far from existing sort of services, and is that going to be too costly to try and sort of put them in? Therefore, it just won't stack up as a site. So there's no point us exploring it at that point. Once we've got the site identified, and everybody's happy with that, planners, community, everybody's happy with that site, landowner is willing to make that site available. What we'll do then is, look at the site in a bit more detail, spending some money on assessing that site. Is it one that we can genuinely take forward, or are there some complications from around that site that mean it won't be viable? So we're sort of spending money at that point at our own risk as well. If it is a viable site, actually then sort of looking at some provisional sort of designs and drawings, what might go on it, what might the houses look like. Let's throw open the village hall doors in partnership with that local group that we are working with, to show the community, to get their feedback, what to think about the site, what do you think about the housing. At that point as well, what we tend to find is those that have held back from saying they may be interested in a home come forward and said, actually, I can see something's happening. We've got a need. Can we be considered for this? And we can signpost them and give them advice when they come forward as well. Subject to that feedback and taking any feedback on board and tweaking plans, then goes in for planning. That can be a long process, again, a costly process. So it goes in for planning, get planning permission, and then there's a build process. And if it's 6, 8, 10 homes, you might sort of be sort of around 12 months, something like that. But also, as part of that process of getting planning, we are also then engaging with Homes England, who are national agencies or funding these houses, about getting in grant to subsidise them to make sure we can charge, social rents now, so rents that are genuinely affordable for local households as well. And we are lining up our own finances to go alongside that. So as it currently stands with the projects we've got on site, around sort of a third of the capital funding for those is coming from grant from Homes England. Around 2/3 is still coming from us as a housing association, from the borrowing we put in place that we will then sort of service out of the rental income that comes from the properties that we rent out. So that financial sort of element is also sort of structured at that point as well. We get on site, we build the houses, that they go up. We keep that communication going, particularly whilst we're on site in terms of how people apply for them. And now that's usually through the local housing register with the local authority. If people aren't on it, which is often the case in rural areas because people don't bother registering because there's nothing available, we signpost how they can get on it. And if there are any complications with that, we sort of support those individuals as well. We then allocate the houses, people move in, and we then sort of manage those houses of longer term, but maintain that relationship with that local community group as well. So each time there is a vacancy, we'll be checking in with that group. So we've got a vacancy coming up. We need to make sure that local individuals know about this, know how to apply for it. Or if there are any sort of management issues there, that we are engaging with that local group around those management issues as well. Quite often they can be the eyes and ears that can alert us to things that we may not sort of see straight away. So that relationship doesn't stop at the point that the homes are built. It's ongoing and continues as well. If we can just go to, I'll flick through, I've got a few examples just to show what the houses look like, how it works. Thought Police Soken, you can see the houses there. This was a rural exception site in Essex. I said most of the developments we build are rural exception sites. For those that aren't familiar with a rural exception site, that is a small site, usually an agricultural site, that abuts the planning boundary but is outside of the planning boundary. And that's quite important because it means that we're not paying a sort of market value for that site as if it would be developed by a developer. We're paying a multiple of agricultural value normally, and that locks in savings that we can then sort of roll in to make sure that the build costs are viable and the houses end up getting built and are affordable as well. So it's a really good mechanism for getting affordable homes built in rural areas. There are some restrictions around rural exception sites, that local people take priority when the houses are allocated, and critically that they remain affordability in perpetuity, so forever as well. They can't be sold onto the market. They will be affordable and available to local people for forever. With this particular site, I think this came from some local landowner, but we work with all kinds of sort of institutional landowners as well. So, for example, sort of church commissioners, diocese, local authorities. So we will sort of negotiate with whoever's got the land, and we have got sort of skills to do that. If we go to the next slide. What I would say as well, building these houses is not without challenges. There's quite often some sort of local objections to what we are trying to do. So actually that community engagement activity is pretty critical. The fact that we are a trusted partner, we know what we're doing, is fairly critical. The fact that we build houses that are well designed, that are environmentally sort of sympathetic, that are sustainable, that is fairly critical. As well, and also I would say that one of the other biggest challenges we're facing at the moment is around sort of build costs, the actual sort of viability of getting sort of houses funded and financed, particularly given the increase in the cost of materials, cost of labour. We're already talking about what we might see this year coming through from the current war in the Middle East. So that does remain a real sort of challenge. So the fact that we can lever in that grant and actually borrow money at rates that make this work as a housing association is fairly sort of critical for us as well. Some of the other challenges around the sites that we tend to overcome are around sort of, access to existing sort of utilities, the cost of infrastructure, so the road, for example, making sure that works in terms of the number of houses that are being built as well. If we can go to the next slide, if that's okay. One of the points I'd make here is our approach to developing, we feel is community led. So we are working with that community body, the parish council, or the community sort of land trust that is locally. We are focused on meeting that sort of genuine local need. And helping to sustain those communities as well. Our developments are small in scale, well designed. Actually, I think the average size of our development, we says typically 10 to 12, but if you look back historically, it's around 8 as well. And the housing that we provide, uses tenancies that are sort of lifetime tenancies, so it's long-term, secure, affordable homes for the community as well. And you'll sort of see from the photos that are popping up that we do use local designs and vernacular as well to make sure that they feel connected to the community and part of that neighborhood as well. If we can go to the next slide, if that's okay. I'm almost done. I'm not gone over time. We've got a royal patron. I always mention that. We're very proud of that. The Princess Royal is our patron. She's actively engaged with what we do. Quite often sort of turns up and will open developments that we build as well, and takes a particularly sort of keen interest in what the houses look like, what environmental technology is in them, and how residents are actually finding living in those properties as well. And you can sort of see there are a couple of openings that she came to. One down in sort of Avening in Gloucestershire, that development there that won a CPRE Design Award as well. You can see that's in the Cotswolds, so using local materials to make sure it sort of fits in there as well. If we go to the next slide, if that's okay. This is actually a CLT development down in Shepherdswell in Kent, which is Dover district. This land came from the church, as if I recall correctly, but this community actually formed a CLT, and that's who we partnered with in terms of getting these homes built. And you can see it's a rural exception site, edge of the village, and you can sort of the layout there and how it connects to the village as well. That's it. So I think there's one more slide to say thank you, but that was all from me, Chris. So I'll let you hand over to the next speaker.
That's fantastic. Thank you so very much, Martin. As always, really, really interesting and informative. Some very, very interesting, broader rural contextual points there as well, which I'm sure people will be more than interested in, because obviously housing, like many public policy issues in rural areas, such as rural economic factors, have to be taken into account, as you say, and they all bleed sort of into each other, don't they? So that's absolutely fascinating. Thank you so very much for that. And yeah, and that's the time we're overall we're a couple of minutes early still, because we were running earlier from earlier on in the event, so don't worry about that at all. Going to introduce Sheila now. Sheila Hawkins, Secretary of Broad Windsor Parish Group Community Land Trust, who will be telling us more about the particular case study, which is absolutely fascinating, and how the CLT there helped lever in, possibly in the same way Martin was saying there, some very, very useful affordable housing for residents in Broad Windsor in Dorset. Over to yourself, Sheila.
Thank you. I've been Secretary of Broad Windsor Group Parish Community Land Trust, which is in rural Dorset, since its inception in 2016. It was formed because in response to a recognised lack of affordable housing to rent within our parish area, which was raised during the writing of the parish plan published in 2012 and again later in the neighbourhood plan in 2018. Rural villages can only thrive with a mixture of all age and economic groups to maintain strong and vital communities and keep their local assets like primary schools, village shops, pubs, village halls. Next slide, please. When I talk about small rural communities, I really mean it. Broad Windsor Parish is approximately 16 square miles, 34 square kilometres, and we're in the far western corner of Dorset, around 7 miles from the Jurassic coast, bordering with Somerset in the north. The nearest small town is 2 miles away, Bridport to the south and Yeovil to the north are each 6 miles away, and our county town is 19 miles away, so we're in the far-flung west. Transport is very limited. There is a very limited, non-existent bus services among the villages. People are dependent on cars, and there are huge social contrasts. There are large-scale landowners and high areas of deprivation. Next slide, please. The project we developed was based on the 2011 census data. Total population of Broad Windsor Parish was around 1,500, usual residents spread across 2 main villages, 5 small hamlets. There's a good proportion of second homes and holiday accommodation, and a slightly older population profile than average in West Dorset. As is the case in many other Dorset villages, or many other small villages, particularly in the vicinity of the Jurassic coastal stretch, house prices have risen sharply in recent years, particularly during the COVID pandemic, when many house sales were snapped up by people moving out of cities elsewhere. This has changed the whole housing market, making buying a home in local villages totally unaffordable for people on working at local wage levels. Around 1/3 of economically active people in the parish rely on self-employment. Because of these factors, there is a scarcity of homes for affordable rent for the local population, many of whom work in service industries. In 2016, the Parish Council looked for volunteers to take forward this community-led housing project by forming a community land trust. 8 volunteers from differing working backgrounds came together, led by Parish Councillor, the late David Leader, to formulate a project of appropriate scale. The CLT was registered as a community benefit society with the Financial Conduct Authority, and we invited members of the local community to support us through becoming members with share sales for a minimum cost of £1. In consultation with the then West Dorset District Council housing officers, we confirmed that at that time there were 32 families from our parish on the local housing list. And with them, we agreed that a development of 15 housing units might be possible, ranging from 1-bed apartments to 2- and 3-bed terraced and semi-detached houses, family homes. We were advised and led throughout this process by Steve Watson and Alison Ward of Middlemarch Community-Led Housing. Nobody told us at this point that the whole process would take 7 years. With the housing officers, we set about doing a search for a site. We viewed 3 sites in Broad Windsor Village and another 4 in Drimpton, and only one of these sites was agreed as suitable by everybody. Next slide, please. This land, the pink patch, 1.5 acres in the corner of a 10-acre field on the edge of Drimpton, which has a population of 400, was offered to the CLT at below the current market value by the landowner, who was a long-established farming family who wished to give something back to their community. This was a greenfield exception site. With grant funding from Dorset Council, we were able to appoint a solicitor to begin long legal negotiations for the options agreement to buy the site. We were able to appoint an architect, True Design, in December 2016 to produce layout designs. We also selected a housing association development partner who would be able to fund the construction stage. This was Yarlington Housing, who later became ABRI. To gather information and inspiration, we visited other local CLT developments nearby in Bridport, Lyme Regis, and the village of Powerstock. With Middlemarch's advice, we applied for central government grant funding to appoint and pay for consultants to produce the feasibility reports for the site. One of the big local issues in Drimpton related to long-standing sewerage problems existing within the village. And to avert opposition to the development, the CLT favoured an on-site sewerage system, which would bypass any connection to the sewer. We agreed layout plans for the development and conferred with the local planning department. Next slide, please. From the outset, CLT board members had very definite views on the type of housing we wished to achieve, aiming to ensure the development design matched local existing community architecture. We specified local Portland stone, heritage bricks, slate roofs, front porches matching those existing in the locality, and we included 2 bungalows at the bottom left of your screen to ensure that the adjacent existing bungalows were not overlooked or overshadowed. We wished to future-proof the housing units as much as possible to keep utility bills low. We designed in air source heat pumps, in-roof solar panels, charging points for electric vehicles, and a very high standard of insulation. For the landscape, we designed in a native fruiting hedge around the boundary line to provide some screening, and within the developments included native trees such as hornbeam, hazel and silver birch to provide seasonal colour. All the landscape enhancements we have created will improve the local ecology and provide beneficial habitat for wildlife. Meanwhile, the CLT kept the local communities informed of progress through monthly reports to the parish council, local newsletters, regular feedback to the membership. In March 2018, we held a community consultation meeting in Drimpton Village Hall, open to everyone within the parish. Here we outlined our progress and invited comments on the proposed designs. Ideas from this process were included in the ongoing amendments. With the majority of the community supportive of the project and designs, there was opposition, which shouted very loudly. We did submit the planning application in August 2019. During a very lengthy process, it took us almost 2 years to get through planning, partly because of the pandemic, and partly we got lost in the midst of a change from district councils to unitary authority. There were long negotiations with the planners about the design, which they wished to make more urban, and we couldn't understand that argument in our rural situation. We did eventually reach compromises. We also had long discussions with highways. Because the village has no existing pavement system, highways insisted that we include an off-road route to the village hall. And that is this long strip going off to the right. This resulted in the CLT having to negotiate an extra acquisition of land to create a hard surface footpath suitable for pushchairs and wheelchairs, which came to the junction of a public footpath, where it turned into a grassy, muddy track going through a kissing gate. So we all knew it was a nonsense, but we had to go through this process to get the planning permission. The other major change to our proposals was that the on-site sewage system we wanted was not accepted by the Environment Agency on a technical issue, the distance to the outfall. So we had to revert to making our foul drainage connection to the main sewer going through the village, which South West Water assured us had sufficient capacity. Next slide, please. The planning application finally received approval from Dorset Council in April 2021. Sorry, I've got the wrong year on the slide there. The CLT's Housing Association partner appointed the CLT's favoured local contractor, CG Fry, to build out the construction of this £3 million project, which began the groundworks in December 2021. Next slide, please. During the course of the construction, the CLT wanted to find a way of keeping the support and involving the local community. Our project Homemaking was managed for us by a local volunteer and funded through Dorset Council's Culture and Community Project Fund. Next slide, please. We were able to commission a local artist, Jenny Beck, to create an artwork, Homemaking, reflecting the change from greenfield to new homes. Prints of the painting were presented to each new household at the welcoming coffee morning in 2023. We were able to recycle materials from the construction site. A group of local volunteers used timber pallets to create hedgehog boxes, bird boxes, a Christmas tree, some furniture. Broken slates provided slate roofs for the hedgehog boxes, plant labels and coasters. These goods went on show at the village Christmas fair and were given away around the community. We were able to commission 2 metal benches made by a local blacksmith. These are located in a communal area of the development and are in memory of 2 CLT board members who sadly died very suddenly during the course of the project, David Leader and Nick Bellerini. We were able to make a photographic record from greenfield to homes. A volunteer photographer from Drimpton took a series of over 350 photographs of every stage of the construction phase. Many of these are available to view on our website. Next, please. We were very honoured in November 2023 to receive the award of Beautiful Community-Led Homes from the National CLT Network. Next slide, please. And these are photographs of the construction phase. During 2022-23, the buildings took shape, completed internally, services installed and connected, PVs and air source heat pumps appeared, the final surface was laid on pavements and road, the landscape was planted up. Next slide, please. The development was completed by CG Fry in August 2023 and tenants began to move in September that year. Next slide, please. Today, the landscape plants are growing and hedgehogs have been seen. Tenants have been welcomed to the local community, babies have been born, and the CLT board has welcomed 2 tenant representatives. The CLT continues to act as a conduit between the local community, tenants, and the Housing Association. It is a small, tight-knit, happy community, very pleased to be living in such high-quality, warm homes. Next slide, please. We have also set up a CLT community fund to provide small grants of up to £500 available to community organisations through the parish area, creating a circular local economy. This uses the annual income from the land rent received by the CLT from the Housing Association. Those who have benefited to date include 3 village halls, young farmers, a toddlers group, a local newsletter, and a project recording oral history of their local place memories. Broad Windsor Parish CLT is proud to have created such beautiful, sustainable homes for people with a strong connection to the local parish area. These homes will remain for affordable rent in perpetuity as a lasting benefit to the local community. However, in 2025, after the completion of our project, there are now 36 families on our local parish from our local parish area on the local housing list. We need more philanthropic land donors. With community-led projects, homes can be created on the right scale in the right place for local people rather than imposed on them by others. They can participate in the design and feel ownership of them, care about appearance, and so on. What CLTs need to succeed in their tasks are not necessarily professional qualifications, but enthusiasm in buckets to commit strong local support and good advice from trusted professionals familiar with CLT context. And never give up. There's always a solution or a compromise to be found, whatever the problem. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Sheila. Thank you so very much. And really, as Tom was saying earlier on, brings to life the whole CLT route into community and rural housing, for parish councils. A rich case study, and you were absolutely right to be awarded the NCLT award when you were. That struck me when researching your case study that was certainly the case. So leading now on into Tom Chance, CEO of the National Community Land Trust Network, who awarded Sheila, quite rightly, and the Broadwinds Group CLT the award a couple of years ago. Over to you, Tom, to look at the national picture and the other main motorway route in to rural affordable housing for parish councils. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm from the National Network, which is a network of CLTs across England and Wales, urban and rural. Very proud to have Sheila and Broadwinds as one of our members. And I'm going to talk about these forms of housing partnership between communities, local councils, and housing associations. Next slide, please. So there are currently over 300, we reckon around 350 CLTs across the country. The map on the right, actually, it's a little bit out of date because it doesn't have Shepherdswell, which was Martin's project down in Kent, but it gives you an indication of the spread of them. The big green dots with little homes in are completed projects by CLTs at that point, and then the other dots are projects at various stages of formation. So you can see they are scattered around the country, and then with real concentrations in certain parts of the country, including Dorset, where Sheila is, because those are the sorts of places where we've got some of the conditions to make this most possible, and I'll talk about what those conditions are in a moment. One of the interesting things we found when looking at CLTs is they have a particular popularity in areas protected by the planning system, places like national parks, national landscapes, conservation areas, where there's real sensitivity from the community about how development takes place, and community land trusts afford those communities a way of being in favour of development that makes their community more sustainable, that, for example, meets the kinds of housing challenges that Martin and Sheila talked about, but in a way that gives the community a bit more control over the process. Next slide, please. So, although we're talking about housing, I just want to flag that community land trusts do all sorts of different things, and here's a rural CLT in West Yorkshire, which really exemplifies this in the Calderdale area. So this is Calder Valley Community Land Trust, working across the areas of Hebden Bridge, Todmorden, and some of the rural parishes around there as well. And they have developed affordable homes. They've also renovated empty homes. They're providing homes with allocations for local people, but also providing refugee housing. They're developing an enterprise centre in partnership with a housing association with affordable work units on the bottom and affordable flats above. They've done a heritage project. They're taking ownership of an old railway signal box and turning that into a little heritage centre, a meeting space. They also own a Victorian hall called Fielden Hall, which used to be owned by a town council and was transferred to the CLT, which has subsequently been retrofitting it to reduce its carbon emissions and energy usage. And they lease that to a local community association to be let out as a space for wedding venue and community events and so on. So the concept of a community land trust is to have a place-based organisation that is owned and controlled by local people and that can undertake these variety of activities in partnership with local councils and others like housing associations. But if we look just in relation to housing specifically, next slide, please. So the model that Sheila has described to you and that Martin mentioned with the Shepherd's Well example in Kent is by far the most popular and common way that community land trusts in rural areas have developed homes. And this is this partnership that can be a partnership made in heaven between a community land trust and a housing association in which the CLT can provide that local leadership to help to identify sites, to help to design in the detailed way that Sheila described something that local people would support. The CLT takes long-term ownership of the freehold of the land and sort of stewards the community's interest in the development. And the housing association brings all of the technical expertise and access to finance and relationships with funders like Homes England and so on that Martin described in order to build the homes. And this works where communities don't themselves want to become amateur developers. They don't want to become a landlord. They don't want to take on all the responsibility, knowing that Martin has teams of people who are trained and qualified to manage social housing. And so you develop that project in partnership together. And there are getting on for 100 now completed projects around the country using this model, and about 40 different housing associations that have partnered on it. And it works particularly well in rural areas, either because you've got rural specialists like English Rural, for whom this is a sort of natural fit with the way that they work, or there are associations that wouldn't normally develop in rural areas, but are willing to do it, where you've got a community land trust and people like Sheila willing to work to bring a scheme forward and a skilled enabler helping to work with them to do that. And then we see some other larger non-rural specialist associations being willing to come in and develop CLTs in that way. Next slide. Quite a lot of rural CLTs have also done their own development. They have been amateur developers, or maybe I shouldn't say amateur. They have become developers of housing, and they manage the housing themselves, right from Cornwall up to the top of Northumberland. The one pictured here is one very near to me in Shropshire, Bishop's Castle CLT, which developed the homes on the right, but in a bit of land around the back of a pub, donated by the owner of the pub. And then last year completed a project where they renovated an old derelict newsagent's, putting some flats above and building some new flats at the back, and then opening up the main space as a new kind of community space for exhibitions and community meetings and so on. So kind of mixed use scheme, the CLT there directly raising its own finance and developing. Sometimes community land trusts that do it themselves also become what are called registered providers of social housing. So they enter into the regulatory world that housing associations exist in, and can access Homes England funding and so on and so forth. Others, like Bishop's Castle CLT here, sort of stay under the radar and manage to do it without any of that. And they're effectively a kind of a community-owned private landlord, which gives them a lot of flexibility over how they manage their lettings and what they do with their assets. So the Bishop's Castle example here, they see themselves as sort of fitting a gap between the housing provided by the housing associations in South Shropshire and then the private market, kind of picking up people who risk falling through the cracks, I think they describe it. And so they have an interesting approach to how they try to select their tenants to sustain the livelihoods of people who have a real contribution to make in the Bishop's Castle area. Next slide. CLTs are also increasingly becoming involved in really quite large-scale development. The new town in Devon, this is a garden village in East Cambridgeshire, in which the community land trusts are taking on stewardship of housing and also open space, allotments, roads, community centres, other amenities. And there's been a trend in recent years in England where traditionally these things would have been picked up by the local authority, and you just pay your council tax or your precept, and that pays for the upkeep and maintenance of these sorts of assets. But now, between 80 and 90% of these assets in large-scale developments go into private management companies, which have no accountability to the community and often run as for-profit enterprises. And so community land trusts are, in some places, stepping in to play that role as a non-profit, community-owned, accountable approach instead. And in the case of this one in East Cambridgeshire and Kennet, also interestingly having a really increased role, an enhanced role in the way in which the whole scheme was designed and developed, in some ways mirroring Sheila's story, but at a much greater scale, and working in this case with the national house builder Bellway. So this model is quite adaptable to different forms and approaches to housing provision in rural communities, depending on what the community is up for and what they'd like to do, and obviously what the local planning authority and others have in store for your community. Next slide. There has been quite a bit of research on community land trusts, and this just captures a bit of the story that we see that where communities can own the land and have this sorts of agency and power, there's research showing that the homes that CLTs are producing are genuinely affordable in relation to what people in those areas actually earn. Both Martin and Sheila talked about rural earnings often being lower and that one not always being recognised. They have a pretty good track record on environmental questions like provision of space for nature. We've heard about the hedgehog highways and CO2 emissions, often because they're choosing to work with associations like English Rural, who also share that priority. And then because people participate, and this is not just the, beyond the parish council, but others within the community who get involved in the whole process, that has public health benefits and improves the social cohesion within communities. And then as a sort of instrumental benefit for those who care about these things, it tends to lead to less opposition to development. For housing associations and developers, it can be attractive to have a very organized supporting body within the community kind of championing the project, and builds up the local capability of that community to go on and do other things, as the Calder Valley case study illustrates. Next slide. So these are the conditions. These projects happen all over the place, but for them to work best, is having an organized community or being able to organize within the community, which is a lot of the work that CLTs have to do. And of course, having a strong local council involved in that process can be very helpful. Having a housing association or more than one potentially interested and open to doing the development is obviously helpful if that's the route you want to take. And there are variations around the country in the net level of interest from housing associations in rural projects like this. Having a skilled enabler, and Sheila mentioned Stephen Allison from Middlemarch CLH working in the rural southwest, is extremely important for the community and for the housing association. And without that person, it's a bit of the luck of the draw as to whether or not you manage to get the right working relationship between the community and the association. And it helps both parties to have a facilitator in the middle who's able to support the process. One of the big hurdles is typically housing associations come in and put their money on the line at the point at which you've got a site and you're quite a long way down the feasibility and planning process. And currently that's costing around £10,000 per home to get to that point. And we're doing a work to try to find different ways of bringing that finance in. We had secured from previous governments something called the Community Housing Fund, which Broadwindsor CLT benefited from, but that money's run out in most places. And so there's a bit of a bind for communities in how you finance that early stage work. And then there's having Homes England funding, and we have collectively lobbied and organised in partnership with Martin and the wider kind of rural housing lobby, so that in fact the new national funding programme for affordable housing lists community-led development and rural as national priorities, which will hopefully help to ensure that funding is forthcoming at levels that make this viable. Next slide. So many community land trusts in rural areas are started by parish councillors, or parish councillors are part of the team of people starting them up. It's always good if they're not, it includes many other people from the local community as well, but local councils can help to start CLTs. They're often providing initial bits of money to get going, even if it's just to hire a village hall to have a public meeting, or to have the incorporation of the Community Benefit Society. We've got examples of neighbourhood plan policies and also local plan policies. One to date in which a neighbourhood plan has specifically allocated a site ring-fenced for community-led development, so it would have to be done through something like a community land trust. Mentioned also the data on local housing need and the work that rural housing enablers do with local councils to ascertain and evidence the need for housing in the area is very useful for CLTs to pick up and then be able to work with. And there have been a few cases where local councils own assets and then disposing of those assets to CLTs as well. Although predominantly in rural areas, it's the private landowners that are providing the sites for these. Next slide. So that's a rattle through. Hopefully you'll find on our website lots of inspiration. And if you were interested in doing this, then just get in touch with us. And quite often parish or town councils are kind of joining the network as the initial stage before setting up a community land trust to take these ideas forward. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Tom. That was a fantastic sort of follow on from Sheila's case study there on Broad Windsor. And there's clearly an awful lot there that parishes have to consider and can do through CLTs. Interesting, you mentioned that neighbourhood or national parks and perhaps SIII sites, etc., are areas in which parish councils could become involved with using CLTs as a model for affordable housing. We've also found at our end that neighbourhood plans have been very, very useful mechanisms for parish councils to have a say at all in the planning system. I think Martin also mentioned some of that. We're trying to organise a meeting at the moment with locality because we're quite concerned with the funding drying up for neighbourhood plans for parishes, 90% of which are managed by parish councils, as you'll appreciate, might dry up or might not be renewed. So we're trying to push the whole housing agenda as far as we can, and parish council kind of say on housing allocations every which way moving forward. So thank you so very much for that. Mindful you need to go in about 5 minutes, Tom, to catch that train. Huge thanks for joining us. What I'm now going to do is I noticed that some delegates have posted some very helpful questions, incisive questions, into the Q&A function at the bottom sort of right of the screen. Would encourage any of you delegates who are so minded to continue to pump in some sort of short, relevant questions there that perhaps all of our excellent speakers can have a stab at answering. And to upvote or give a thumbs up to any particular questions already posted in there you think that we should be asking speakers in limited time. I'm going to move to a question first, which the co-chair of our own Climate Emergency Network at NELC is asking, David Newman from Oxford, who asks, says, we have existing housing associations in our urban parish. Blackbird Leeds is where David's referring to in Oxford. How can we get them to improve maintenance and improve the houses, e.g. retrofit? I'm going to probably aim that at yourself first, Martin, if that's okay, because you probably cover urban-esque style housing a bit as well. I'm guessing maybe in the towns. But if you want to have a stab at answering that, please.
Yeah, we don't have any urban stock. All of our stock is in rural settlements of less than 3,000, normally, so much smaller than that. But I'm happy to pick up the questions, Chris. And I think that there's particular reference there to sort of retrofitting, isn't there, as well? I mean, what I would say is, as landlords, there are obligations on us, both in terms of the condition of the properties, how we have to invest in making sure that properties are sort of fit and meet certain sort of standards, but also that we are investing in making sure that they achieve certain environmental credentials as well. And with that latter point, that means we've got to get all of our stock up to EPCC or above by 2030. Here at English Rural, we're going for it sooner than that. So we're investing quite heavily in retrofitting, which can be problematic in rural areas as well, I have to say, in terms of retrofitting, trying to think about how you could sort of approach each house to do that. So what I would say is there will be some obligations on that housing association to be investing in it in the years between now and 2030 to make sure that it is becoming more environmentally friendly and certainly a sort of C or above. And it may be worthwhile asking that question. When is that planned for, and what might that look like of the housing association to see how they're going to meet their obligation, and then in terms of the actual sort of maintenance of the property itself, I think most housing associations, if I'm honest with you, you can have quite some open conversations with them, and as a local stakeholder, if you are concerned about the way that the houses are looking. I mean that you legitimately have that conversation with the housing association. I don't know which housing association it is, and we probably shouldn't name names. But what I would say, whether it's housing association CLTs, they're always a mixed bag. Some are better than others, but most are responsible. And if you don't have any luck with that, Then Tom referenced the fact we take public money means we are very heavily regulated. So there are some separate conversations that could be had if you have concerns that landlord isn't meeting the obligations and the standards that they should be as well. So, but my first recommendation is just go and talk to the housing association, find out who's managing it locally, have that conversation to say, listen, when are we spending money on this? It doesn't look great.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Martin. Tom, a quick answer if you have any experience with this or any steers, perhaps more generally, more broadly on retrofit on any of your projects. So I realise that, as in Martin's case, they'll be largely rural, but any quick steers for David there before you go?
Well, there are community land trusts that have been retrofitting homes, more tend to be ones where they bought existing stock and then are retrofitting it, because obviously they're a relatively new phenomenon, so they don't have many that they've built themselves or with partners that need retrofitting already. And I suppose as Martin and Sheila have described, where the CLT either owns them themselves, they're solely responsible for them, and so what Martin says would apply. You need to go and talk to the CLT about their homes, or where the CLT owns the freehold and has leased them to the housing association. That just slightly changes the relationship that the community has with the housing association, and that again would be a kind of route into the discussion. But obviously, for the vast majority of rural homes here, we're talking about, just as Martin says, go and talk to the association or whoever it is that owns and manages those homes.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Thanks very much indeed. Realise that some of these questions might have an urban aspect to them. Sheila, do any of the houses at Broads Windsor Group's sort of development have retrofitting in them since 2021 when you were given permission to build? Have there been any requests for retrofitting that have come up from residents?
No, they were all singing, all dancing Grade A energy homes when they were built. So they are a lot better than a lot of the existing homes round about, which was our aim because we wanted to future-proof them. We haven't yet started on any second project because it's taken us a while to recover from 7 long years, but any second project could well be a retrofitting project of an existing property. It's something we have vaguely talked about and could consider doing.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed. Yes, I suppose with them being such recent developments, retrofit may well not have almost been superseded by the class of house and the quality of them, as you already mentioned. That's brilliant. Thanks very much indeed. Just wanted to, I know retrofit does occasionally get discussed at our climate emergency network sessions as well, and it has been current. So I did just want to raise that. Tom's obviously had to go for his train, so we'll say huge thanks to Tom for his input, excellent input, as with his health and Martin, Sheila. Moving on to the next question, Martin, you might want to have well, you probably know. I always thought that a definition of rural was anything with a population of under 10,000. I don't know if that. So speaking with a colleague at Action for Communities in Rural England yesterday, their rural evidence manager, he still thinks it's 10,000. But Philip Rowe, who I think may be a clerk somewhere down in Devon, I think, asks what constitutes rural. Would a market town in a rural area still be classed as rural? Do you work with towns or only parishes? This is a loaded question here, Philip, but I'll ask it anyway. Can a parish or town council be a partner in a project if they own an area of land for development of a social housing scheme? Initially to yourself, Martin, I'm not quite sure where you'd start in answering that one.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many definitions of rural, aren't there? Even with sort of DEFRA, they'll cut it so many sort of different ways. And then in terms of legislation and how different legislations of lays over rural, that's a whole sort of another session to talk about. What I would say, I think two things out of that from our perspectives as a housing association, we work with smaller rural settlements, and those are where populations are below 3,000, and we do that because that's where rural exception construction sites apply, and that is our main mechanism for securing sites. So we work with smaller rural settlements. But if Tom were here, he would be saying that actually sort of CLTs cover a much broader span than that. Indeed, it's not just sort of large rural, so sort of 10,000, but metropolitan as well, CLTs. So they are not limited in the same way that we are necessarily limited as a housing association. So certainly from a CLT perspective, population of 10,000, I'm sure if Tom were here, he'd be saying, no, that's not a problem at all. We already do that. We work it with those communities. But from our perspective as a housing association, we work with smaller rural. But that's just our decision as a housing association. There are 400 or 500 housing associations operating across England, and each of them also have their own sort of take on this, and quite a lot of the others are working with those sort of larger rural settlements as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, exactly. I realise there's probably no single definition. That's fantastic, Martin. Thank you. Yeah, Sheila.
I can confirm that CLTs exist in market towns in Bridport. There's a CLT one is a CLT like ours that has totally affordable rented houses. And there is another CLT that was a self-build project. And they have, some are shared housing, some are affordable housing, and some are private housing. And they have built into their design communal facilities as well. And in Dorchester, which is our county town, there's a CLT there as well, in the midst of Poundbury, which is Prince Charles's housing experiment.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. That's really useful context. Didn't know that. Thank you, Sheila. I won't ask you to comment on the definition of rural, Sheila. That would take us well beyond 115, I believe, as Martin rightly alluded to. What I'll do is I'll split these questions up because I think there's some really good questions that both of you might be kind of expert at answering. Martin, you alluded to Homes England in your presentation. There's Philip again asks the question: will Homes England work with a parish or town council to promote a scheme? Community, by that, presumably by that he means a community-led housing scheme. And do they, i.e. Homes England, have funding for parish town council schemes? I know that in your excellent publications before that we've helped promote, Martin, regarding parish council kind of case studies of where they've inputted to affordable housing schemes that your housing association has brilliantly, instigated. That parishes have been front and centre in some of those projects. But yeah, any comments on that about Homes England funding?
Homes England will only fund registered providers, and that is either housing associations or CLTs that have gone down that route and registered. They need to be registered to access that public funding because it gives Homes England certainty around how that public money is being sort of directed and how it's being sort of spent. Now, I can tell you, as a regulated housing association, that comes with a significant burden of compliance. So it's not a route to go down lightly. Because the expectations are very, very heavy in terms of reporting, not just on receipt of the money, but ongoing as well. So unless sort of Phillips so in CLT wants to sort of register, then no, Homes England will not probably engage directly. They would want a sort of intermediary housing association who is a registered provider who can access the funding to then flow into the development that gets built. So my advice is twofold, really. If you think you want to register, have a look at it. Talk to somebody else, another CLT, and I'm sure Tom will introduce you to another CLT that has. Think about it very carefully. Would be my advice, or find a trusted partner who actually can access funding from Homes England on behalf and form part of that partnership, and do some research on who that partner should be based on their credentials, where they work, what the houses look like, how they maintain them, to make sure they are that that partner that you want to work with long term as well, not just when you're building the houses, but what do they do when the houses are built? What kind of landlord are they?
Brilliant. That's really helpful. Thanks very much indeed. Yeah, moving on, Sheila, there's a question from Roy Clare here. And again, it's a general one with regard to CLTs, who asks, is there a template policy document that you're aware of, or that your Broad Windsor Group might have been aware of, or that you may have used for a parish council to adapt or adopt when establishing a CLT? Clearly from what you said, Broad Windsor Parish Council has been instrumental in helping establish the CLT, or was 5, 10 years ago in your patch. Did you access any such kind of template documents, or were you aware of one? I'm not. I'll be honest. At NALC,
I'm not aware of a policy document as such, but we were advised and guided very much by Middlemarch, Steve Watson, and he provided all sorts of templates that they had drawn up to help bridge between parish council and community, because although it was requested by the parish council to help them provide the housing, they couldn't do it themselves. They had to create a different vehicle, a legal vehicle entity, in order to be able to build the houses. So I would advise you to get in touch with, depending on where your parish council is in the country, get in touch with somebody like Middlemarch, who have the knowledge and templates of all sorts of material that you need to go through the process.
Yeah, I think we've come across them before, actually. I think there's a parish clerk to Edgeton Parish Council up in Shropshire who's called Janet Cobb, who generates a lot of the materials, I think, that we use in our climate emergency network, and probably has some links with that particular CLT. Thanks so much for that. That's really helpful.
Either that or get in touch with the CLT network. They're bound to answer.
Completely. Tom's network, indeed. Listen, trying to squeeze one final question in, which is from Claire Tagg, for both of you, and then I'll just make my slightly dry final statement, kind of on the feedback form and things at the end to close the event. Down for 3 or 4 minutes left. So Claire Tagg says, we've completed a housing needs survey, and predominantly the need is for affordable family houses, including self-build. There are 2 sites that are currently trying to get planning permission, but the model in Cornwall, which is presumably where Claire's based, seems to be for open market houses for sale, and affordable houses, often small, for rent, and these don't match our local need. Any thoughts? So if I direct that one at Martin first, maybe because it's a bit of a broader question.
Yeah, and I think that also touches on the question that Sue has asked earlier on around sort of the market housing element of village in Worcestershire as well. I mean, most local planning authorities now, when they're thinking about sort of rural housing provision, particularly on rural exception sites, they do allow a degree of market housing. You have to justify it, and justification is typically that without it, the costs won't stack up, so the project isn't viable. So on that basis, you can normally sort of do some market housing, and indeed we have done that before as well. Whether that's selling off some plots or building out some houses ourselves, but it always has to be a lesser element. And I think the question in Cornwall is not necessarily that they're objecting to that model of cross subsidy by building the market, but actually that market housing isn't meeting the need that they identified, and indeed is taking away from the need that has been identified. I think that's questionable in my view. Certainly, I think there's conversation there to have with the local planning authority to say, we understand that there's a need for cross subsidy to make this viable, but we still want to try and meet the range of needs that have been identified through our survey. And I'll give you an example of that. There's a village in sort of Essex where we sort of built, I think, 3 bungalows alongside 8 other affordable properties, a couple of shared ownership, 6 rented. And the intention behind that was to meet the range of needs. So those from older owner-occupiers living in the village that wanted to stay in the village but couldn't access a house or property that was suitable for their needs. So we actually built the market element as bungalows for those older households, alongside some shared ownership, a couple of those, and then rented and a range of sizes as well to meet that broad range of needs. So my advice would be to talk to the local planning authority, say, we're not particularly happy about this. This is the need. How can we sort of structure this in a way that is going to meet that need and also do the cross subsidy? And I think just touching back to the earlier point around the 4-bedroom houses, what you will be pushing against is actually the easiest way to get that cross subsidy, and the easiest way to get that cross subsidy is larger market housing. So that is the motivation, if you like, that is pushing that. But it's perfectly legitimate to say that's not what we want to do. It's not what we want to support. Let's have a conversation about sort of the tenures and that market element.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. It is complex, as you say, and the local need often, varies from place to place. Absolutely, Martin. Sheila, any final thoughts on this, on Claire's and Sue's kind of questions?
Speak to your planning officers and try and find other CLTs who have gone through similar things in your vicinity, because there are a few CLTs in Cornwall. So just look up the CLT network and find out where's near you and have conversations with them. But I think it is important not to be driven down the route of having to create market housing you don't want. Simply, there's got to be a way to subsidise affordable homes that people need to rent rather than buy. There's a big requirement there.
No, absolutely. It's often been the case, as Martin alluded to, that successive governments have tried to fix the broken housing market in a flexible and national way, whilst also allowing building more houses that are going to either be bought or rented. Yeah. But equally working with developers where they can and housing associations, but still allowing that flexibility for local models which work based on locally negotiated housing allocations. Fantastic. Thanks both very, very much, and of course in absentia to Tom, who had to leave at 1. So a huge thanks to our fantastic speakers, Martin, Tom, and Sheila, for their valuable and insightful contributions today. Really, really interesting. I've learned a lot myself.